Sederunt, and apologies.
Good morning. We have 22 members present, and I have apologies from Councillor Nicholl and Elaine Dennis. Councillor Blake, Councillor McGregor and Councillor Wiper are not present but may be along later in the meeting.
Councillor Diggle as well, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to item 2, do you have any declarations of interest? Councillor Dempsey, Jim?
I can't hear what's going on for this machine bumming behind us, Chair. You might at some time, somebody might want to report it, because it is difficult for members in this corner to hear what's being said, especially if some of their members have low voices.
Could we see if there's any way of reducing the noise from that? It is quite intrusive. Sorry, Jim, I can't hear you for that thing behind you. Okay. So if we move on to item 3, the minute of the meeting of the 24th of November, we have somebody move that as a true representation. Yep, seconded. I'm probably to second it. Okay. So we move on to item 4, Education Services. Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 2015-16 for the period ended 30th November 2015. Colin, this is your report and Karen's speak to it. Is there anything you want to add to the report, Karen?
Oh, sorry, thank you. Yeah, it was just to sort of highlight that it's just an update from the last report to November committee. The service is still on track to deliver a break-even position, and that the report is broadly similar to that reported to this committee in November, so happy to take any questions.
Members? Dick?
Thanks, Chair. Refer you to page 15. The third column there, school-based social work provision. Quite a large sum for a pilot we've started this year, £150,000. It's whether that's sustainable in the long term, because it's unlikely, even if the pilot's successful, we'll be able to roll it out over during the next 3 years, certainly. The recruitment has partly taken place, but it's gone to the report at this stage. It's still recruiting. It's whether we should put a moratorium on that until we know until we set the budget. That's my point there.
Colin?
Thanks, Chair. The current, just to give you the fullest up-to-date position, it is a test of change. So we always knew this wouldn't be a sustainable agenda in terms of additional policy funding. The plan would be to test out whether it's working well, and on the basis of that, adapt the social work deployment from main social work staff in the longer term. We have managed to recruit a social worker and support worker in the west of the region. The other part of the recruitment hasn't taken place yet, as far as I understand, but we need to just double check that with Lillian Kringles. Clearly, the options are around maintaining for 2 years what we've already recruited in the west, or potentially taking on that further recruitment. And if there wasn't the funding for next year, it would be entirely possible just to put a stop to that for next year. Again, I suppose that would be part of budget setting considerations for everyone. But I recognise what you're saying, and what I will do is establish whether there's been any movement on the further recruitment that was due to take place in North West Dumfries, and let members know.
George?
Thank you. I'm just wanting to go back to the supplied teaching issue and teaching posts in general. Supplied teaching is obviously a challenge in a lot of schools, and we discuss it at the parents' forum. And there's clearly challenges there to get supplied teachers in. I don't know the detail of but my understanding is previously supplied teaching costs were quite high in terms of payment to the supplied teachers, and the system was changed whereby the remuneration is a bit less. Speaking to retired teachers, they were quite happy to be supplied teachers, but they find it difficult to justify in terms of the costs. Just to sum up, is there any proactive way of improving the supply situation across the region and with individual schools, whether it's a pool of supplied teachers? Because the evidence we have from parents is that some children are getting teachers that can't teach that subject, and that's no disrespect to them. We have teachers going into schools who are unwell because of the pressures of exams, etc., etc. I know it's a real challenge for everybody, but is there a strategy, is there a policy, is there a thought process going through this to try and improve that situation?
Yeah, we do have a strategy in place. It's continuing to prove very challenging, both in terms of recruitment and in terms of supply. On previous occasions, we've sent out to all of the members all of the different things that we're trying to do to try and improve the situation. I'd be happy to send that to you, George, if that's helpful. It's a whole range of things that are being tried. We've certainly attempted to have permanent supply teachers, but not had any applications for that. But I'll send you out everything that's been sent in the past to members. Okay.
Andy?
Okay, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things. I'll do one at a time. I think it's probably the easiest way. At 3.8, the partner providers, the small underspending grant payments. I think almost every political group's been getting representations from the partnership providers about the sustainability and feasibility of continuing. Is there a way we can get an up-to-date percentage of the total early education provision that is actually provided by those partnership groups? And also, a piece of work that was done, I know, a number of years ago about the sustainability of those groups, given that they are the provision of early years education in some remote rural areas in particular, and the bigger towns. So could we get something on that, sort of kind of a matter of urgency, because I think it will have an impact later on in this budget setting process?
Yeah, certainly I can ask Hugh Smith to provide an update for you.
Sorry, the second thing is, if I refer to page 14, Appendix 2, I'm a wee bit flummoxed at the use of the word sanctions and then freeze, because if we turn to the word freeze first, my understanding was it was to maintain or increase teacher numbers, not to freeze them as they were. That was to be the baseline of the census of 2014. And the other question on that would be, is what sanctions have actually been applied by the Scottish Government to this council?
I think the sanction from the Scottish Government was the fact we lost £303,000 in funding because we weren't able to maintain the teacher numbers. We did have 1,520 teachers, which it fell to 1,504. As a result, because we weren't able to maintain the absolute teacher numbers, despite the fact that the teacher-pupil ratio is still the same, we didn't receive £303,000 in funding from the Scottish Government, which has to be found from the education budget.
Could I come back in? That's the political answer. I'm asking for the teaching answer. What actual sanctions, because not complying with an agreement, right, isn't being sanctioned, right? It's a non-compliance with something we entered into with our eyes wide open, right, and didn't then fulfil for a number of very good reasons, and I'm not knocking the reasons why it wasn't fulfilled, right? But it's the use of the word sanction, because sanction tends to mean we've done something wrong, right? There's no intent here to do something wrong, but I'm asking for an answer from officers here as opposed to a factual answer about what actual financial sanctions have been imposed by the Scottish Government on this authority.
Ronnie, on the same item?
Yeah, the same point. I mean, maybe Councillor Ferguson doesn't like the word sanctions, but it is a sanction. We've been sanctioned that much from the Scottish Government with the cuts in their budget. We were forced into this, taking them numbers. We didn't want to take them numbers, we were forced, or else we would be penalised in other aspects of it. There was a £1.4 million that we needed to keep the teacher numbers the same. They gave us £300,000, or they didn't give us £300,000 as it turns out, but that's what they were going to try and mitigate that £1.3 million that we needed to keep the teachers the same. Teacher numbers are not. We agree with teacher numbers. You know, if teacher numbers and the Scottish Government want to keep teacher numbers at that level, I will do that as long as they fully fund it, which they didn't do. It's not us playing politics with it, it's the SNP government that's playing politics with it.
Yeah, I suppose, Chair, I would add, it's certainly not for officers to be political or evaluative, and there's no intention in that to... there's an element of semantics about how one reads the word sanction. What we're trying to describe, I suppose, in shorthand, is a change in financial arrangements which have meant that the original agreement in the SL review is not now possible. So it might have been better if that said a change in financial arrangements. Officers were not trying to be evaluative or political.
Rob?
Sorry, thanks. That was the answer I was looking for, because the change in financial arrangements are different from sanctions, because, and I'm going to stop the politicalisation of the education of your children here and just move on from there.
Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. Can the Director advise me whether the ERVS scheme was applied to teaching staff in this current financial year?
It's not being applied for teaching staff in this current financial year. As you know, over the last number of years, the IRVS scheme has been very successful in terms of the refresh agenda and bringing in a lot of new young blood into the service. However, given the fact that we've really struggled to recruit, and given the fact that I wouldn't use the word sanction, given the change in financial arrangements are such that if we don't recruit up to the full numbers, that's going to be a financial challenge for the council. We feel that it would not be looked upon favourably were we to allow some staff to retire and we ended up with not enough staff here. So it's not being applied to teachers in this financial year in the way that had been over the last number of years.
Follow up, that's helpful. I mean, I know that the leader has written to the Scottish Government seeking clarification on the terms of the settlement for the forthcoming financial year, which it seems to be eminently sensible. I know he's been joined by a lot of other local authorities in doing that. It might be helpful from our point of view to have an understanding of what the movements were in the year. Effectively, what I'm looking for is how we ended up where we ended up. Because I don't have a clear picture of what led us to the situation that was reported to us effectively at the full council. And to the best of my knowledge was the first point at which we actually had that information.
So I can certainly help with that, Councillor. The teaching numbers in school in any given day, we couldn't put our finger on, okay, because it's a huge job to go back and check with all the schools. On any given day, there might be supply staff in, they might not bring supply staff in. We could have filled vacancies that have been outstanding and someone else goes off on maternity leave. So it's constantly fluctuating. Our assumption was that since we didn't take any savings and applied exactly the same formula to every school, that we would make our teaching numbers. We would have done so if we hadn't had vacancies that we were trying to recruit to. So there really was no pattern or change in policy that led us to being around 15 short at the time of the census. It was simply that we'd been unable to recruit. So nothing has changed, and I don't know what else I would be able to tell you about that around detail. I would imagine at this point we won't be 15 short because we were actively recruiting at that stage, but we might have managed to recruit 6 or 7 and a couple of people might have gone off on maternity leave. It's a really big workforce. We've got 120 establishments and it's difficult to pick that up on a day-to-day basis. But certainly in terms of overall policy, we have attempted to fully recruit, and certainly I would have preferred to be spending the 303,000 on teachers in school than have the vacancies and not have the money. So we do want to try to recruit up to the full number, and all of our efforts are to do so.
I just say on the basis of that, I attended the, I think it was a November meeting of the Causal Education, Children and Young People Executive Group, and the general feeling amongst all the chairs of education who were present there across all the political spectrum was this wasn't a sensible way in which to actually monitor teaching outcomes. You know, this is an input on a particular day, a moving feast, if you like, and councils were having to spend additional sums of money to try and meet this target, to guarantee they could meet this target. So it's all about inputs. It's not about outcomes from the education process. And the general feeling was there's far too much of this centralisation of education going on at the moment. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Will the Grow Your Own initiative offer opportunities for further teacher refresh?
Alan?
Okay. The Grow Your Own initiative, which is funded for this year, means that we can expect an additional 9 teachers to that which we would normally have recruited. That in itself, I don't think would give us the level of cushion that we would be comfortable with to offer refresh. Okay? There's a potential for next session to have an additional 30 places, as we know. Whether those places will be taken up, whether there's any way that there could be any backfill of funding is a massive challenge for all political groups in terms of the budget that we're trying to look to. But I would at least expect that some of those places will be taken up. And again, it may only be that provides the cushion that allows us to get up to full recruitment. I wouldn't be comfortable or confident in allowing a tranche of refresh or retirements to go at this stage.
George?
I may be speaking through naivety here, so apologies if I am, but is there an appeals procedure for this sanction, as it is a sanction? And secondly, if there's no appeals procedure, is there a means of, if you can't get teachers, is there room to use some of that budget, if you get some of it back, for the likes of graduate trainees, classroom assistants, things like that? No. That was the answer I expected, but there needs to be some sort of, it's draconian to lose £300,000 for something you believe is out with your control.
I wouldn't argue with that, George. Ronnie, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and the short answer is no, there is no appeal. I've had a letter from the Scottish Government saying they will take this £303,000 off us as a sanction, and because the teacher numbers on that day, as the Chair of Education has pointed out, and on that basis they said no, this is they're taking that money off us and that's it.
Yeah, can I just say when the initial letter came out regarding this, it said there would be no extenuating circumstances whatsoever, which, as you say, is quite draconian. Okay, I've got nobody else looking to... No. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As soon as we're going on about teacher numbers and census days, can somebody tell me when it was reported to Education Committee that the actual number of teachers that were reported at the teacher census in December last year were actually reduced throughout 2015? The official figures were revised down. When was that ever reported to committee?
My recollection is that we worked throughout the year to try to recruit to the full amount. We were negotiating right up to the last minute with our return with the government in terms of the final figures, because they were checking and they were deciding what was being counted with some of the preschool staff. And up until the day that the announcement was made that we were deemed to be short, we were uncertain as to whether the actual places and teaching spots which we were recruiting to would count as a reduction. So in our mind, we did not anticipate that this was a reduction in teaching numbers. I gave a very full report to the full council on what had actually happened. We've tried to be really open and transparent with that. And again, Jim, I've got to be honest, we can't on a daily basis. The actual census check takes weeks and weeks to go around 120 schools to make sure that everything's absolutely up to date. What I will say is that we're absolutely redoubling all of our efforts to try to make sure that we are at the same level that we would want to be at. And I would anticipate right now we're very close to that. But again, the challenge with supply staff coming in, the challenge with not having a large pool out there means that, you know, a spell of illness or people deciding to leave, retire off their own steam, or indeed maternity leaves, etc., leaves us vulnerable. But we'll do everything we can. And you know that, for example, the Grow Your Own is quite an innovative programme to try to get more staff. So the Education Department has got no designs to try and reduce teachers. We're absolutely trying everything we possibly can to maintain the number that's expected of us.
Dr. Jim?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. I'm fully appreciative that the Education Department are trying not to lose teachers. We have enough problems, as has been said, getting supply teachers when we need them. But it was actually the official figure that was reported originally on the census date in 2014, during 2015, was officially revised down. I was wondering when and where that was actually reported to committee.
Sorry, I can't explain that. And again, that was actually at the very last, I think it's in the full council paper. At the very, we had, at the point at which the final census was taken, we were sent all of the information for final check, including the previous year's information. We had challenged the previous year's information because it had been collected centrally, and the previous year's information had included figures that had come straight from nursery and straight from providers and straight from the schools themselves for preschool. Preschool had never been taken as part of the census in the past. It was collected centrally. Our education officers at the time were in contact with officials at the government to say we don't think this is accurate, but it was left as that. And when the final check came out this year, we went back to them and said, look, we can provide all the evidence that that wasn't accurate last year, and they accepted that. So there's no revision downward, it was just a clarification. I think that happened with 6 or 7 authorities. Okay.
I think it's also significant that after the results were reported back in to full council in December, the Scottish Government then announced an additional £20 million, I think it was, to train additional teachers, recognising the national shortage of teachers. Okay, can we go to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3? Okay, thank you. So if we can go to item 5, the 2 to 18 service review. Director, you want to speak on it?
Thanks, Chair. This paper, if you look at section, I'd just like to highlight and bring to your attention sections 3.1 to 3.6 that explains the background and history to the paper coming to this particular committee. The original 2 to 18 service review has changed both in scope and in part timing for a number of reasons. The original review was a wide-scale review of the service and how we might deliver education for young people. The change in arrangements around teacher numbers and indeed the change in arrangements around the likelihood of fixing the length of the school day meant that a number of areas moved out of scope for consideration. The result of that was that for this current year, for the year coming, we'd been set £1.4 million as a target. There was a consultation that went out to parents around with £1.9 million roughly of options. All of those options were based around savings which would not lead to any reduction in teacher numbers, of course. So effectively, it really was a percentage slice of each of the different service areas that were not related to teachers. The intention still was to come back to March Committee of Education and for the Education Committee to debate the savings and make recommendations and prioritise 1.4 million of the 1.9 million. However, following the increase in savings that are required for the budget, it was decided really that for all service reviews that members needed to see what all of the options were and the responses that had come back in order to help inform their budget thinking as we move in the months ahead. So that's why the paper's come early to you. It means that members have seen what was discussed out in the schools with parents and with staff. you see what the responses are, and rather than making any recommendations, we would simply highlight that those were the discussions that took place, and we'd be happy to come out to meet political groups to discuss any detail if that's helpful. There is one thing I need to highlight so that every member's aware of it, and we'll send this out to all members as well. There's one saving which can't be applied effectively, which is saving P, which is curricular swimming, because we've established that if you were to take that saving, it simply adds 130,000 budget pressure to leisure and sport, which of course now sits under my directorship anyway. So if we were to take that saving, it would mean finding another £130,000 from leisure and sport. So probably that one needs to be ignored. Everything else is deliverable, and the responses from the parent group, the staff group and others are contained in pages 27 to 31. And we hope that that would be helpful for individual political groups.
Thank you, Colin. I appreciate that the director's offering to go out and meet with all the political groups and discuss this in great detail. I mean, obviously, even the £1.9 million of savings which are outlined here probably aren't going to be sufficient to meet the overall savings we need to make to achieve the 21.3 million of savings we now need to make. So obviously we'll have to identify additional savings as well. But we are also conscious that the parent representatives, the church representatives and the teacher representatives obviously won't be part of this further consultation. So if there is anything pressing, then I'm quite happy to let you come in on that. Alistair?
I didn't realise you noticed me, Chairman. Thank you. I've got a couple of points in widely different things. The first one, if you'd be kind enough to let me take them one at a time. First one's page 20, regarding resources commissioning partner providers. Is there any chance of having these different aspects of this split? I mean, what goes to partner providers, what's commissioning, what's resources? It's all together, and it would be helpful if I could have some clarity on that. That's the first question.
Yeah, we can respond to that and send that to you. Yeah.
Thank you. And the second one was, it's already been alluded to, swimming on page 24. On top of it, it may be anecdotal evidence that I'm hearing, but I understand that as this programme, we've had a bit of some problems with the closure of DG1, obviously, and in delivering this. I was under the impression that it was primary 7 that got this, and maybe I'm too far away from education now to understand that. And the second bit is, how are we achieving this? I believe it's a statutory requirement to make sure that children can swim by the time they're out of primary 7.
I can respond to that. Thank you, Chair. It was always primary 7, but there was a view that we needed to work much lower down the school. So we've been working over the last 4 years to ensure all children that couldn't swim 25 metres, be they in primary 7, 6, 5, 4, with the ultimate aim that this year it should just be primary 3 and 4 pupils that have the extracurricular swimming, so that younger children can swim. If they can't swim 25 metres by the end of primary 3, they would then be included in the primary 4 if they still can't swim. So it's cumulative. So it's been an aim generally to just target the non-swimmers.
So if somebody was in primary 5 when we made the change from primary 7 down to primary 3, 4, I take it they were caught, we audited that and made sure that we weren't going to miss anybody.
Yes, and I think that has caused some disruption. Any change process causes disruption for the schools, and I think, in fairness to our swimming colleagues, trying to move a system where you target all primary 7s to then all non-swimmers from primary 3 upwards can be disruptive, particularly in multi-composite schools. You know, you've got kids going in and out of the school regularly, but we're now in a situation where it should just be non-swimmers in primary 3 and primary 4. So I think it'll be much smoother, any operational. I think we can make some operational arrangements that might make it easier for the schools, because it is disruptive.
Gail?
Thank you, Chair. It's just that it was the element of consultation with the parent councils, which I think has been very well received and was done very professionally. They were very appreciative of the PowerPoint that you gave them. I was invited to 2 or 3 of their meetings, as Colin's aware, which I gladly went along to, and fortunately, because I sit on this committee, have a fair understanding of what was in the savings templates. But the members weren't given that information, and I think that that's a failing. Next time, if we do that, we need to have that information, purely for information in case we are invited along. But it's as we go forward, sort of looking at further savings, will we get the consultation responses back? It doesn't need to be individual schools, but a general feeling of what they were comfortable with, because certainly sitting in the room on 2 or 3 occasions, we had parents saying, absolutely don't want you to touch that, but you can take that out, and and so on and so forth. Do we have that level of feedback from each individual school or not? And would it help us sort of in our decision making?
Okay, two points to that. Thanks for that. Firstly, I took back after the last committee, when you raised the fact that it would have been helpful for members to have the PowerPoint in advance. I went back and spoke to John Thin, and it turned out that all of the consultations had taken place by that time, so it was a wee bit too late, and we would certainly do that the next time. At this stage, there's no plan in terms of the service review for further consultation at this stage. But the feedback, so there's quite a lot of feedback in here, but if you were looking for individual schools, that probably exists. I'm certain it will exist, and if you would like that sent out to you for particular schools, I would imagine it will be quite a big tome, and I don't know if all members would want that or not.
I certainly don't want you to identify individual schools either, because I don't want one school to say, yeah, we're quite happy to scrap music instruction, another school to say, no, we're not. I think it's a general overview of what were perceived by the parents and the staff within the schools as being potentially acceptable savings options, and those that they were much more uncomfortable with. And I think probably the head teacher could lead on that. They would have a very sort of clear overview of the feelings of those particular parents and staff groups. So it doesn't need to be a tome, it just simply needs to be a summary, which could then help us to make decisions when we're having to look at these savings.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor. I genuinely thought that's what this was on pages 27, where it gives all the percentages and the relative. So, for example, information technology, outdoor education, instrumental instruction seem to be the big ones that people don't fancy taking. So I thought there was quite a lot of detail there. If maybe we could speak after committee and see if there was more that you wanted, but we were certainly trying to summarise that for you.
I think the problem is, given the number of schools we've got and the differences in size, then is it representative rather than sort of aggregating all the results together and taking the input from that? But certainly, I mean, if you want the information, if it's available, then I'm sure it will be supplied. Jim McComb.
Thanks, Chair. A question in relation to item L in the review, small schools. First point, why has this element been identified specifically for inclusion in the review?
Okay, we at the moment are in the process of looking at the viability of a very small number of small schools. I think as an education committee, you're aware that we sometimes would have concerns if there's only 2 or 3 children in a school. And we felt it was appropriate to put within the service review the savings that might accrue from the closures of small schools which might take place. So that was the reason for that.
The second point, the budget element is over 18 million. Now, I assume that is the overall budget for these schools.
Yeah, I think that's...
Yes.
Does that include teacher salaries as well?
Yes.
Would it not be the case, though, that if the schools close, the teachers are redeployed?
No, the calculation around the saving doesn't include a reduction in teachers. It's really around the running of the building, potentially the clerical staff, etc. If those schools close, the kids go somewhere else, and that needs an extra teacher somewhere else. So that's not included. The 121,000 is based around non-teacher savings.
Andy?
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, thanks very much, because actually this sets it out nice and clearly. The only one thing I would ask in Appendix 1, could we put in there the percentage of the budget savings? I know we can work it out, but it's a long time since I did my O-level arithmetic. It'd be really helpful if we could do that. And the other thing I was pleased to hear Colin actually referred to, that there's other areas that are coming into his bigger department now. And can we assume that the social work and the leisure and sport bit that's going to apply in under your directorship, this can actually expand to actually deal with the holistic child, the whole child, not just the leisure and sport child, the social work child and the education child?
Well, at the moment we're still in the education committee, so obviously the savings out with the education budget isn't any of our remit.
It will be easy for us to reissue, send it to members with the percentage savings on it. That's no difficulty at all. All I would say is that obviously I'm in very close contact with social work, leisure and sport heads of service, and in terms of the responsibility I've got as Chair of Children's Services Executive Group, all of the savings are being looked at in terms of the overall effect, and at least everybody is well aware of the different savings and recognising the effect that one might have on something else.
The reason for my question, Chair, was that, you know, we've got other members of staff who are a wee bit unsure just exactly how everything's going forward into the future here, and it's a way of making them aware that they are part of a bigger picture. We've been here before as other members of this council are aware in the past when we created a behemoth which frankly wasn't workable, and we need to be very, very careful we don't do the same thing again. That's my point.
Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just a couple of points. One point, just on the back of Councillor McComb there, I think he brought up a relevant point in regards to L in Appendix 1, and we have got reports later on, and I just to say that, again, I certainly wouldn't take consideration of savings in regards to any future decisions that we do make, so just to make that clear, because I think it's important that we do. It certainly wouldn't have an influence on my decision making in any further reports that we do make in regards to potential savings. We've been through a long consultation process with that, and a proper consultation process, and I think that it'll come to its natural conclusion. I'll be opportunistic to a degree in regards to, it's been mentioned already that we are short in regards to our overall budget across the council. I just wonder, I mean, it's been raised with me on numerous occasions now, and it's just probably a misunderstanding what was agreed last year, because we agreed a 3-year budget last year, clearly, and there was some community councils with an expectation that they would still see the annual come back and would talk about the budget savings and so on and so forth. But I've explained we did it. We took a 3-year position last year. We are taking more, taking about 2.5 years now because of the adverse cuts we'll have to face up to. So some of them are actually curious to see how can they actually feed into this, because when they actually going back, and some of it seem maybe been partly consulted, but are we going back through any type of consultation with communities and such like, and towards any further cuts, or is that, I mean, and I suppose that's probably for either yourself, Chairman, or the leader in regards to that. Like I say, I am being opportunistic. If it's unavailable, that information at this moment in time, I'll pick up on it later. I think it's important that we do start to address that particular point, because the communities in Dumfries and Galloway are starting to raise their heads with us and think, oh, what do these extra cuts really mean?
I mean, obviously the size of the cuts we've been faced with on such a short timescale is very problematic in terms of going out to any other sort of meaningful consultation, but perhaps the leader could...
No, I think you're absolutely right, and you're absolutely right, Ian, regarding that and consultation, and it's something that we would like to do, but unfortunately we haven't got the details of the budget, so we don't actually know the scale and the impact on services that we will need to be looking at. Until we get that clarity of information, as was pointed out before, I did write to the John Swinney. I've actually invited him down here to talk about the impact it would have in Dumfries and Galloway, and have a look at individual services and speak to officers, not just politicians, about this, about that and what it actually means, and with the hope that it would change his mind. I know they've got lots of money in reserves and things like that they could use, and the impact on local government is something unprecedented. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, it's not, we're the deliverers, if you want, but these cuts are actually coming from the Scottish Government. They could have mitigated more, and hopefully, you know, John Swin will accept our invitation and he'll come down and he'll speak to us about that, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Thanks, Chairman. Certainly welcome that. If Mr Swinney was able to come down and discuss that further, it would certainly be welcome from my group.
Yeah, I'm sure we all would.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. Following on Councillor McGregor's point about the consultation with parent councils, etc., and the three budget headings which the director alluded to, the effects on information technology. The computer's obviously at the heart of the curriculum for excellence now. Can we ensure there won't be a significant impact on learning and attainment by this reduction? Also, what will be the impact on the health and well-being agenda by cutting down on the outdoor education budget? And finally, how long will the cut in the discretionary budgets for schools be sustainable? Obviously, on the short term, it might be feasible to maintain standards, but in the long term, obviously, it's going to have an impact on schools.
I think every proposed budget cut will have impact. There's no doubt about that. The extent of that impact is not possible to be absolutely definitive about. In terms of detail, the part of the issue is that some parts of what we do are statutory and can't be considered. Some parts are led by teachers and can't be considered. That leaves a relatively small number of areas that we can consider in trying to provide options for yourselves. None of that is very easy. In terms of ICT, it's clear that staff and pupils and parents value that. The particular saving in there is a 20% saving, and the likelihood is that what would happen there is that the different devices might be refreshed in a slightly longer period. So, for example, in PCs, we refresh them between 5 and 7 years. They probably all go to 7 years. Laptops are 3 to 5 years. They might all go to 5 years. And those are the sort of savings that would happen. We would probably reduce slightly the number of devices that are in the schools. Now, being definitive about what impact that would have is impossible, but that's the sort of way that would be applied. In terms of outdoor education, it's terrific for kids, there's no doubt about it, but it's not a statutory service, it's not led by teachers. So again, members would need to decide which they value highest, and that's where you might want to look at what responses have come through. And it would have been a very fruitful debate, I think, to have at education if we only needed the 1.4 and you were able to prioritise. But the goalposts have moved significantly, and that's why we're laying it all out in front of you.
Yeah, I think, you know, we need to remember that I think so far we've had to save £48 million off the council budget. This 21 million takes it to almost £70 million, around about a quarter of the council budget. And a lot of these savings are unpalatable, but at the end of the day, we need to produce a balanced budget. And, you know, this isn't savings we would want to make. These are savings which are being imposed on us, unfortunately, by the Scottish Government. George?
Before we go on to my main comment, just to back up the ICT, I think a lot of the parents felt that it wasn't, there's a cost and there's an investment, and information technology is an investment. And looking even beyond individual schools, because we're struggling for teachers in certain levels and advanced hires, that kind of technology can help kids from one school engage with a teacher in another school. So the general feeling was that we should be at the cutting edge of technology because that can save money and it can generate outcomes more effectively than other things. But on a more general thing about consultation, the first thing I would have to say is I really need to commend Education Services for really engaging with the Parent Council. Now that we have a Dumfries and Galloway forum, the education service people, I won't mention names because there's several of them that have put a huge amount of effort into that. And the key to consultation with parents and any layman, if you like, is the information that comes through is clear and understandable so that they can make an informed judgment. And that's the benefit of consultation with informed people. But that equally is the challenge. It's a massive challenge for us as parent representatives to get that information across. So I commend the Council's Education Services team for working with us. I can only say that this was probably a bad one to start because it was very complex. And even at the meetings that we had, and even though that we worked with Ed Services in trying to make the wording parent-friendly, we still found within the individual school meetings and area meetings that we had to really work hard at explaining things. You know, immediately you talk about psychological services being cut, there's a great no chance, but then it's admin. So the more clear the consultation is and the more engagement with the parents' forum, then the better we'll get, both in engagement and considered reflection. So it's more of a comment and praise to the education services, but hopefully we can carry that on.
I would expect that would be the case, that we would refine the process as we go into the next year. Unfortunately, it just appears as if there are going to be further years of this process to go through. Okay, I've got no... Alistair?
Thanks for letting me back in. Page 25, the asymmetric week, 4 long days, I think that should be. I'm in favour of this, and immediately when I saw the phrase the harmonisation of secondary timetables, this appealed to me greatly because anything that, and I dare say we'll get more of this at the seminar at the end of this meeting, anything that encourages parents to understand that we provide high quality education, and there's really not a huge difference between the different schools, and there's an awful lot of misinformation out there, and what has just been said, I'm sure the parent councils can assist in that, but what I would like the assurance office to is that this information will be disseminated and people will be aware of what our plans are and the advantages of them. I know there are certain disadvantages, and that's highlighted in terms of transport. I dare say, though, that we'll be in consultation with the bus companies and make sure that it's a seamless transition whenever it comes.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, at the moment, those are only proposals that we're going to start to build on before we put out any concrete detail. Already you're aware that in terms of Dumfries Learning Town, it would be absolutely essential that there was a level of harmonisation across the 4 secondary schools. But we're recognising that you get quite a lot more efficiency and benefits from the 33-period week. A lot of other authorities have adopted that, and it's something that we're going to have a look at in terms of next year. This was really only giving a sort of portent or an idea of what we'll be looking at in further service reviews for next session.
Okay, members, can we go to the recommendation? Gail?
Sorry, with your indulgence, it's just going back to the consultation, which, as I say, I think has been great. I think perhaps what I'm really looking for is maybe a further breakdown of responses from primary and secondary, because I think that some of the savings very much relate to primary, so the secondary school representatives and parent councils would say, yeah, take that, and vice versa. And I think to get a real picture of what people felt about certain savings, we maybe just need it broken down slightly further into the 2 sort of separate sectors. And I mean, obviously we've got 120 odd schools, but we've only had 330 responses, on average per saving, which doesn't seem a huge amount. Did every school respond, or could we even privately have a list of which schools responded?
Julie?
Yes, parent councils were asked also to submit a joint response so that we could help establish some commonality within each parent council. And as you can see from page 5 in Appendix 2A, the response counts from the individual parent councils are between 2 and 40. So we've got 120 establishments, so we've got responses from about 1/3 of parent councils. So relatively low, but we can certainly let people know which parent councils responded.
And what we'll commit to do is go away and have a look, if it's possible, to split it up between primary and secondary. I don't know how the detail is sitting at the moment. If it's possible to do that, we will do that.
Okay, so moving to recommendations, can we note... Oops.
Very quickly, Chair, thanks. I'm looking at the review team on page 39, and can we be assured that I'm harking back to the partnership providers again, that they're actually adequately represented here, because they're significant. I mean, I know you're going to bring us back the percentages, but they're significant contributors towards the early education of our young people.
Thank you. Certainly Sandra Fisher is on the review team, who will ensure that the partner providers are fully informed and included.
That's my point. Is there someone from them actually on the review team, given that they are part of the provision team, not just... You take my point, Gillian? Yep.
Absolutely. I think it's important that we get a collective voice from the partner providers, and if there's a forum to do that, we'll make sure that we get a representative. I think the head teachers that are on the group are very clear that they represent their cluster and that they represent all of the head teachers, or they have a collective voice for the teachers. So we need to ensure that anyone who's coming onto the group is not speaking on an individual level, and we'll make sure that that's done.
Okay, so moving to the recommendation. Right. Speaker George.
It's just a quick comment that the parents are already represented on that group.
Thanks, George. Okay, so we can move to the recommendations. Can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4? Okay, thank you. So moving to item 6, beyond the school gate, street traders and school food. Members will remember that at Education Committee on the 31st of March last year, we agreed to look at the possibility of looking at the licensing of street traders with respect to provision of food out with the school gate. If any members are interested, I've actually printed off a copy of the Beyond the School Gate, which is referred to in there, which makes quite interesting reading. But Neil Carruthers is available to speak to it. Neil, is there anything you want to add to your report?
Just briefly to say that I received fairly significant comment in this report from colleagues in licensing service, given that their potential role in enforcing this and the legal basis of doing so. I think it's, they've informed this paper quite heavily. I'm happy to try and take any questions.
Members? Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. When I read this, I thought, well, that's the ball up in the slates then, effectively. But it's potentially not, albeit there's obviously the judgment that we have, and it would appear not going to be appealed. But I'm also very conscious that there are, 13 other licensing authorities that have some sort of provision. I mean, I presume they're all now looking at theirs, and they'll want to work out what they want to do next, whether they can do anything next. Is there any mechanism by which we'll get a feel for that at some point in the future, and we can maybe revisit this? I mean, I don't think we have to do it immediately, obviously, and I'm not sure that we want to divert a massive amount of time to it, but it may be that someone comes up with a clever idea that lets them fulfil the policy intention and not fall foul of the particular ruling that has caused the problem. I just wondered if there's any way we'll pick up on that in the future.
I think that the matter's been referred back to the government, given it's ostensibly this is a legal issue. It's about the power that a council has to enforce this. I think if there's anything that comes out of that, we would be advised, as would the other 13, who may in themselves make representation to the Scottish Government about this. I'm conscious that in this, there'll be a very great amount of work going on at schools in terms of health and well-being that's supporting the overarching policy. This is only specifically what powers a council has to impose any conditions on vans.
Yeah, I think given that there are obviously 14 other local authorities which have been directly affected by this now, then I think what we need to do is keep a watching brief on where they go in terms of that, and if there is any progress, bring a report back to committee in due course. Yeah. Gail, you? Ronnie?
Yeah, I understand the position we're in, and we won't be looking at different ways to, you know, mitigate that result from the courts. But are we looking at things outside of licensing as well? Are we looking at, you know, just off the top of my head, something like, you know, restrictions about waiting time for all vehicles outside schools during certain periods, or, you know, 15-minute waiting times or something like that?
Again, certainly we're doing what we can, where we can influence. Waiting times, parking times, again, we would need to take advice from our licensing colleagues, but what we are doing is bringing the traders into the Parent Council discussions. So a couple of good examples where the schools are very concerned about behaviour or nutrition, and they've actually worked with the Parent Council and the traders to have joint meetings about what can be sold and when. So there are local agreements that no fizzy juice will be sold before 9 o'clock. So that's what we can do, and where we can influence the traders for how they run their business, then we do it. In terms of, I would need to take more advice from our roads colleagues as to what we can enforce otherwise.
Vice Chair?
I think what we can do is ensure that our officers who are able to do these things can check the vehicles fairly regularly to ensure that the standard is up to what it should be, and they're not letting people away with having rubbish vans there providing food to youngsters. So I think it's very important that we support the officers if they bring issues towards to the licensing panel.
Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just when I read this report and I got to the Sheriff's conclusions, I came up with the exact same conclusions myself. And Gillian's kind of alluded to the fact that there is alternative methods, and I think that's the route we should be taking. I don't think the licensing panel or objectives is the route for the Education Department to take. I think this was the right decision by the Sheriff. I might be a lone voice in that, I don't know, but there's plenty of alternative routes we could be taking as an Education Department.
Thank you. The judgment is disappointing, but probably expected, and of course we're concerned about the health of our young people. I wonder, however, if there's anything that can be done within terms of the existing legislation. Am I right in assuming that there are certain restrictions placed on the sale of high energy drinks to young people of a certain age? And if it was found that street traders were contravening that, they could, well, be done, quite frankly. But am I right? Is there something there that can be done? Certain items cannot be sold to certain people of a certain age.
Julie?
Again, I would need to take advice from our licensing people in terms of what constitutes an energy drink. I know that schools have entered into local agreements and have raised concerns where they think they're selling drinks, high energy drinks for youngsters coming in to school, and they're on the ceiling, to coin a phrase, at 8:30 in the morning. But certainly if schools are worried that what is being sold contravenes the rules, then I would take advice and hope that officers would deal with that severely.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I think given the nature of the judgment and the fact that North Lanarkshire have chosen not to appeal, we really have little option other than go with the recommendations.
Okay, so moving to the recommendations.
I'm just wondering how big a problem this is in their area, because in my ward, two major secondary schools, probably within 300-400 yards from the schools, there's 2-3 chip shops or snack shops. You've got 2 supermarkets that the kids attend, as I say. So to me, is it a major problem really there? I would just go with recommendations, even although I've got to agree that the verdict that came out for the court was pretty, that ruling was pretty, to me, it was wrong, like, but they shouldn't be sitting outside the schools. But as I say, they've got other means to get fish, chips, any unhealthy foods that they want, even, as Alistair says, probably the high energy drinks, then get them at the supermarkets. And the kids that go to these supermarkets and that, you're talking dozens of them at a dinner time heading for the supermarkets, the chip shops, etc.
Yeah, no, John. Okay, can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1? And can we agree 2.3 to take no further action on the decisions, awaiting further guidance from the Scottish Government? Yeah. Okay. Okay, if we move to item 7, School Let's Progress Report and consideration of charging arrangements, and it's Neil again. Okay, is there anything you want to add, Neil?
Just very briefly, I mean, it's a progress report that gives detail of activity to this point in the year or to the point in December, and I would intend to bring a fuller report with full year figures to a future committee.
Can I ask Neil a question? It's been brought to my attention by a local primary school that used kitchen facilities for fundraisers. They've now been told it's got to be manned by a member of DG First Staff at a cost of £12 an hour. Is this for using the facilities, or is it a health and safety issue?
Again, the kitchen facilities actually, if you like, belong to DG First, and it's their requirement that in terms of their lead tenant in that situation, and they therefore expect a member of their staff to be there in a supervisory role.
That's fine, Chair. Oh, sorry.
Jim McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's regarding Appendix 2 in the PPP schools. Can you just remind me what the contract details are for the additional hours in the PPP schools? Are they monthly or yearly? I take it we don't pay any extra for the additional hours, it's rolled up into the contract. And what happens if these additional hours aren't used? Do we get a rebate? And if so, where does that rebate go? Does it go to the individual school or does it go back to the centre?
Claire?
Thanks, Chair. So in terms of the additional hours, we have a bank of additional hours included in the contract. If we do not use all those additional hours, which we're not using at the moment, they get refunded, and that's reported to committee on a yearly basis. So it's brought back within the sinking fund, so we don't lose out on that. Can you remind me of the first question? I was walking while you were talking, sorry.
Yeah, it was just whether the additional hours are monthly or yearly, how they're calculated. I think from memory it was monthly.
They're allocated yearly in the contract, they're broken down to monthly, so we have that flexibility to use them when we need to in the year.
Right, got no one else. Gail? I have to stop saying this.
Jim's covered part of my point about the contract details for the bankers. How many bankers do we have? Sorry, you've gone again, Claire. And the other information, I mean, obviously we're operating at Lockerbie Academy with additional sort of hours through leisure and sport, and I think those figures could do to be separate because we need to monitor whether the leisure and sport side is being used well enough for it to be sustainable. And we need to sort of see, what hours are being used by the community out with that. So, and as I say, how many bank hours do we actually have per year?
Okay.
Councillor, from memory it's about 9,000, but I'll confirm that in writing. I could reissue the paper that we did because it details all the questions there in terms of monitoring efficiency for leisure and sport and the community hours. It gives you a lot more detail, so quite happily to reissue that paper just for members' memories refresh.
Andy?
Thanks, you're partly asked and answered. And it's really just how do we relate with the new harmonised charging policy that's currently getting looked at? It's at 3.5. I'm not entirely sure of following what Neil's getting at here in his report. If it's just me, say that, Neil, but if we agree 3% now, right, and then the Leisure and Sport Review comes back with something different, given it's all one big department now, and their community facilities now, what effect would that have on this if we agree it today?
My understanding in this matter is that this committee is asks to ratify the fees and charges that we apply for school lets. We operate within the harmonised fees and charges, and they are uplifted annually, I think, by 3%. So we've consulted in this with leisure and sport colleagues. I've just recently got the harmonised fees and charges through them. There is some very minor discrepancies. We're talking pennies between, but I think that's to do with the way that it's calculated. It's rounding up errors as opposed to anything significant.
Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Andy's picked up on a point, but I was thinking of it in a different way. 2.3 asks us to look for another report coming, a progress report coming, and there'll be further information in that. And for me, that information is relative to recommendation 2.2. And how do we come to the conclusion of being 3% of an uplift? Neil's touched on that in part. So I just wonder, where does the 3%? Is it just because it's historical? I mean, because we're going forward through a budget process, there's a correlation there. And I was thinking about asking to defer the 3% decision until such time as we get the further information. But again, that would depend on how long it takes to get that further report. If it's midway through the year, there's no point. We'll be on. We need to make decisions, obviously, for the new financial year coming up. But ultimately, because of what Andy said, it's triggered it maybe a wee bit further. But why 3%? What does it actually relate to? And is there room to actually to defer this until we get that further information?
Julie?
I think you're absolutely right. What we're trying to do here is give users a bit of notice should there be an uplift. We committed last year to write out in January to any long-term users so that they would be aware of any increase and give them an opportunity to arrange alternative accommodation. So we're trying to get a decision on a proposed 3% uplift, but we've also got a review of fees and charges going on in the council. So we're offered us, or it's suggested to us by CCS that there should be a 3% uplift. There's a fees and charges review, and we've got our users wanting to know what the prices are as from April. So this is a position to help us manage that. I suppose it's an interim indication of what the charges will be.
Okay, I accept that and I would imagine the progress report, what we do agree, if you could maybe pick up on the timelines in regards to that, and maybe better picked up fully as for the next financial budget, but certainly take that on board.
I'm sure we can accommodate that. Okay, so moving to the recommendations. Last one, Andy.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm just referring to page 54, and it's about the VAT exemption. Is there any indication, or how do we know which sports actually, or some people perceive as sports, some people don't perceive as sports, what activities, maybe a better way of putting it, actually qualify for zero rating? Well, for example, are we using Sport Scotland's list of what they consider sports, or what are we using? Because that includes dancing, Highland dancing, they're all in the Sport Scotland portfolio.
I'm not aware of any disagreement about what we define as sports. I know that there's been some discussion about whether it has to be the same sport, and it quite clearly does. So it's the same activity, and we do use the Sport Scotland definition. I'm not aware of anyone being charged or not charged where we're defining specific particular activities, but if you are aware of something, please bring it to our attention.
So moving to the recommendations. 2.1, note the current uptake of school lets. Yep. 2.2, agree the 3% uplift. Yep. And 2.3, agree to receive a further progress report. In due course, okay? Okay. So we move to item 8, which is on page 55, the statutory consultation on the North West Campus. This is really quite a good news story, in as far as it actually is indicative of the momentum which is growing behind the Dumfries Learning Town, especially the phase 1. So we have Claire and Annie Johnston to speak to this. Is there anything you want to add to your report?
I think only to say that we've consulted quite extensively as part of this and over a significant period of time, and I think it's a really positive sign that we've had only one representation in terms of this proposal, and really that was around operational issues which we've been able to address with the person who made the representation. There was nothing around the procedure or the proposal in general. Happy to take any questions.
Members? Are we certain? Okay, can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1 with regard to the statutory consultation? Yeah. Can we agree 2.1 to implement the proposal to close the 5 schools? And 2.3, agree the Director of Children, Young People and Lifelong Learning should notify Scottish Ministers of decision at 2.2 within 6 working days of this committee. Okay?
Chair, can I just clarify that
Sorry?
was 3 school closures, not 5 school closures for this one?
Sorry, yes.
If that's okay.
Okay.
I know. And just to clarify to members that the process from this point forward is we have to notify government. There's another further 3 weeks of potential representations that any people can make to government, and we will advertise that on our website. And then the government have 5 weeks following that to consider it. So there'll be an 8-week period before this. We're advised whether the position will be called in or not by government, okay, before we can implement.
Chair, if you don't mind, if I could also just update members in case you're not aware of this. I think we notified you, but following the decision at the last committee to write to ministers in the closure of St Peter's and Dobiti, at the end of that process, the ministers decided not to call that in, and so that is now progressing.
Thank you, members. If we move to item 9, which is the statutory consultation on Langlands School. Annie and Claire, is there anything you want to add to your paper?
I think only to say that this is a co-location rather than a closure, and so there's no requirement for us to notify government.
Members? No? Okay, so if we can move to the recommendations. Can we note 2.1? And can we agree 2.2 to implement the proposal to relocate Langlands School? Thank you. So moving on to item 10 on page 185, which is the statutory consultation of the Elmbank Centre. Annie and Claire, anything you want to add? No? Members? Okay. So can we move to the recommendation? Can we note 2.1? Can we agree 2.2 to implement the proposal to close Elmbank Centre? And can we agree 2.3? Thank you, members. Moving on to item 11 on page 229, which is a rural school provision, Mouswald Primary School. Once again, anything you want to add to your report?
Nothing to add, just to note that this is a rural school provision, so it's required increased consultation and requirements under the Act, and we feel we've duly complied with that and reported to committee on it.
Members? Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just to commend the team, obviously, for all the hard work they have. They've doubly ensured that they went through the consultation process. They've done a really good job. It's contained within the report itself for clarity. It's on about the catchment areas, because obviously catchment is referring to Cullen, but there's some residents or parents, potential parents, whatever it may be, because they're unnamed, it's been redacted information, saying that, listen, we're sitting Clansfield side of Mouswald. To put that into context, it's a few miles to the east on the low road between Annan and Dumfries. So they're saying we're actually nearer to Cummertrees and we're Cullen. So there's an issue there. So just in regards to that particular piece of information that's in the question that's been raised, just how is it we look to address that? I mean, I thought it brought up a really valid point. Didn't actually see that it had been sorted within that report, but maybe it has. So just that point, I thought they brought up a valid reason that, in fact, if you're living closer to a primary school, being Cummertrees, which they are living in Clansfield compared to Cullen, should that not become the catchment area, rather than using the school itself as the centre point? Okay. Chairman, thank you.
Happy to answer that point. So we had 2 representations during the initial consultation period of 6 weeks regarding 2 future parents who were querying regarding the realignment of the catchment. We responded to them and we redacted the replies to make sure that they were published, and obviously they didn't identify any information. To note that they did not make a further representation during the second consultation period. So in terms of responding to that and looking at realignments of catchment, we have a look and we look at all trends about where people have chosen to take their children if they've not gone to the catchment school. We also do a profile of any future and likelihood children that we're aware of. Now, in that particular catchment, I think you probably have the same conversation with any of them, that they all sit different places if you look at the individual postcodes or unique property reference number. When we did a profile of all the properties within the Mouswald catchment and where the children are and where they've gone, there was no direction of travel to say that that part of the area of the catchment went to Clarenceville, for example, another one went to, say, Cullen, another one went to, say, Noble Hill. What we did find was just a random pattern of people going in different directions because of their own particular circumstances. So there was no data to indicate that that catchment area should be broken apart. What I would say as well in terms of looking and how we went forward in terms of aligning with the Cullen catchment was that you're starting to get onto the boundaries, that Mouswald is aligned with the Dumfries schools. If you go any further east, they're aligned with the Annan schools, and then you're breaking up clustering arrangements, which would be quite challenging. We also had a look at infrastructure in terms of travel, buses, etc. as well to help inform that proposal. And also as part of this issue, sadly we're considering the closure of one rural school, but what we want to do is to be a positive story for other rural schools in terms of supporting that. Cullen was the best opportunity to do that, and also I would say that Cullen has got a nursery provision as well, which led us to believe that Cullen, and we could justify it through the data analysis and trend analysis, albeit I acknowledge that it will not meet the requirements of every parent's, but that doesn't negate their right as parental choice to request to go to another school.
Ian?
No, thanks for that. And I think that last point was particularly relevant. Just when it comes to transport then, obviously for your schools, for your kids getting to school. And I mean, I do know some parents who live in Clarenceville, their kids go to Cummertree School and then they go to Annan, on to Annan as a secondary. But fair enough, they've never brought up any transport issues. But I think it's still, maybe I'll pick that up with the committee. It's maybe not overly relevant here, but I think there's maybe still room for a wee bit of argument there, whether if you're closer to a particular primary school, by the settlement you stay at, whether you should be allowed to go to that particular school being your catchment. And as far as the recommendations, like I say, it can only be commended in as far as the amount of consultation that's been taking place. And I would agree with the recommendations, Chairman, as being a local ward member as well as a member of the Education Committee. And just go back to the point spoken very briefly, so we're absolutely clear, because it's been brought up on a few occasions, is there actually, when it comes to closing Mouswald School, any financial benefit, is that part of the decision-making process? Whereby it's included in a previous report, it's got nothing whatsoever to do with any decisions that certainly I'd be proposing at this stage, so just to make that clear.
Dick?
Yeah, just to echo Councillor Carruthers, thanks for the hard work that's gone into this. Question on the transport, obviously, it's an important issue. To get to Cullen, you've got to cross the A75 really from Mouswald. There are children that go from Clarenceville, just a mile east of Mouswald, by bus to Cummertrees. Would it not be easier would that not be any better transport solution to go to Cummertrees?
We did look at all the transport aspects about how children and their families are choosing to access the schools. I think everybody's got different requirements. Some people choose to use the family vehicle. Some people are looking for reliance on public transport. What came out of this one was the driver for walking and biking to school. And that certainly led us to believe and give us the data and evidence to say that Cullen was the right option to match it to. And Education Scotland picked that up in their report. So what I would say is there is a variety of needs, and we've tried to best meet the particular requirements of each and every family. Though I'll acknowledge that there might be a family that might prefer that option, certainly the pattern and trend that we saw was to support green travel, and that led us again to the Cullen option in terms of the realignment of catchments.
I'd just like an explanation on that one, because obviously green travel, if you're cycling, you don't want to go across you don't want to traverse the A75 Well, it's,
Can I just say there is actually an underpass under the A75 at Cullen.
yeah, it's going to
But if you want to debate it further, then you can do that out with
Yeah,
the
there is an
the committee.
underpass, and Cullen Primary School were working on their green travel plan, and that involved the senior year pupils at the primary doing surveys in terms of their preference to actually use that underpass to access it safely.
Okay, moving to the recommendations, can we note 2.1? Can we agree 2.2 to implement the proposal to close Mouswald Primary School as of July this year, and agree 2.3? Okay.
And can I just reiterate to committee again, this starts the process of engagement with government now, so it's not the closure will be implemented now. We have to notify the school and we have to notify government and wait for any further representations and for government's consideration of our adherence to the process.
Thank you, members. If we can move to item 12 on page 271, Hannahfield Trust and Dumfries and Galloway Council and Education Endowments. This is basically a housekeeping report. Colin, is there anything you want to add to it?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Okay. Members? Good. In that case, can we note 2.1, agree 2.2? Okay. As the Director said, there's a education seminar. Would you like to give us more information about the timing and the subject?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There was a request when we brought a paper to Education Committee in November, I think it was. Ostensibly that one was about capacities, but there was quite a bit of debate among members about the challenges that had been last February during enrolment time and then appeals, and it was felt that members would like more information about how all of that works, what changes there have been, so that they were well informed if constituents contacted them. What we suggested is that we could have a very brief informal seminar at the end of Education Committee at this stage, just to give you an update on enrolments, an update on any changes in practice, and ensure that you're fully informed. Because that invite has been gone out to all members, it might be you want to have a 5-minute break and start that at 12 o'clock. Or, I think it said 15:15 or at the end of Education Committee. So,
Just for, can we go to 12:15? Obviously, maybe members coming there, so we can have a brief break. Yeah. Okay. Jim?
Yeah, Chair, it's just I know of 2 of our members that are coming down. They thought it was half 12 start.
12:15 it is, yeah.
Go to 12:15 in that case. Okay, thank you.